Okay, today I'm going to show you how you can plan an essay for a poem in 5 minutes using my trusty stopwatch for a poem. In this case, it's The Trees Are Down by Charlotte Mew, which was just used in your trial exams. The key thing I will say before starting any of this is that you must know the poems. There's no point trying to interpret the poem in the exam, otherwise you definitely won't be able to do that in 5 minutes and you won't get the in-depth analysis that you need. So the first thing you need to do is to read the title. I'm going to time doing this. I got a bit overexcited and highlighted first without pressing record, but I'm just going to show you how you would do that in the exam. Okay, now the reason I've highlighted movingly and feelings of loss is because they're the two key parts of the poem, or the question even. So we know if it says movingly, we talk about the effect of the audience, and feelings of loss gives us a focus for the whole essay. So once we've got that, we can now look at the poem as a whole. Now, the way I recommend to do this first is to look at structure, because if you try and do that whilst you're doing the poem, whilst you're going through it, you'll just get muddled. So I always start by looking at the structure. I'm just going to highlight a few things, then stop the stopwatch and explain to you what that means. Obviously that will be in your head in the exam, so you don't need to do that. That doesn't count as part of your time. Now, annoyingly with poems like this, it is worth pointing out that these lines here were actually one long line and they've been broken up for the sake of formatting, but actually when it's got a small letter and an indent, it normally means that they've had to put it on a new line due to formatting rather than the poet herself. You can also tell this by the line numbers at the side. So I'll go through the structure points that I would highlight and then stop the timer and explain them. Okay, so if we just briefly go through what I've highlighted here, again, you might sit there thinking, oh, well, you did that very quickly. That's only because I know the poem. If you revise, you'll be able to do it as quickly as that as well. So if we have a look at what I highlighted here, it's the opening line from the Revelation, which is a part of the Bible. It ends the poem with another quote from the Revelation, and shows that it's the angel saying it. So we could almost say that it's cyclical, which means it almost goes in a cycle. And you can make links to the message of the poem by saying that that shows the ongoing destruction of nature, or even the ongoing life of nature, and how it continues to regrow and live. But remember, our focus is loss, so we'd probably link that to the destruction of nature. Here, I did a squiggly line to show that actually there's no set line length or order of the lines. And if you look at it, it's more obvious when the lines haven't been broken down. But if you look at it as a whole, it kind of reflects either trees, or you could say the chaos that is caused by loss, because again, we want the focus to be loss. and you can link that to Charlotte Mew's life, and she experienced a lot of loss and her life became chaos when she then commits suicide. Here we've identified some rhyme. I did that very quickly and didn't get all of it, but the important thing is with rhyme is that you look for key messages within the rhyme. So for example, here we have high and sky together and that and rat. Now high and sky is quite a positive image and that and rat is quite negative. Now the thing that breaks that up is the down now. So that's almost like the axe cutting. And therefore the juxtaposition of those two is the destruction. Here again, down here, we've got plains, rains, breeze and seas, all to do with nature. But again, after that, we've got dying, flying, lying and crying, most of which are quite negative or show an end to something. Okay, so we've got some structural notes there and that's a good basis. Now what we're going to do is go through each stanza. I'll go through it in the time and highlight what I think is appropriate, and then I'll go through that with you. So we've still got quite a lot of time left. Okay, now remember, if you highlight something, it doesn't mean you have to use it. It just means that you've got it in your head. So I'll just briefly explain why I highlighted these certain things. So they instantly refers to the people who are destroying the nature, so the men, and it's quite harsh because it's quite ambiguous, and the collective noun there groups them all in together and kind of makes them look like a separate group. We've then got great and saw, swish, branches, crash, rustle, trodden. All of which are onomatopoeia, which vividly gives the image of destruction. But also there's assonance, sibilants, consonants, all in there, which leaves it with quite an uncomfortable feeling when you read it. And that's deliberate. We then go on to the men, and it's whoops and woes, and again the alliteration emphasises the loudness, and again we've got common repeated here, which could be to do with the background of the men, so their socio-economic status, or it could just show the common occurrence of destruction. And that's Charlotte Mew's kind of comment on how commonplace it is now to destroy nature. Okay, so we've got some notes for stanza 1. Let's go on to stanza 2. And we've only used 1 minute and 22 so far. Okay, so instantly we start this stanza with I remember, so we know that it's the speaker becoming nostalgic and looking back, on something that has happened, and we get instantly the seasonal imagery. And we know that you associate spring with regrowth and rebirth, so that's significant. We've got the dead rat here as well, which is imagery. And we can tell by these other things I've highlighted, godforsaken thing, that and even a rat, that this is negative nature. It's almost the speaker using an extreme of nature. So a rat. So not a pleasant thing that you associate with nature. But the adverb here, even, shows that even a rat should be considered sacred, or at least should be alive in spring. Then we go back to the trees. Roped here makes them sound like a tethered animal. So you're instantly becoming sympathetic towards the trees. Green and high, so again we've got lush imagery. So they're lush and magical. And this is very majestic. But then they're lonely. So the trees are personified here. And again ties into that pathos that is created towards nature. Unmake the spring links to the destruction of nature that for the speaker means spring is no more. Okay? So again, we've got some really key stuff for that stanza, and we're just going to move on to stanza 3. Okay, so we've got the adjective great to describe the trees. And then we go back as well to the repeated whoops and woes that the men have used, and also this harsh verb, which makes it almost seem like these majestic trees, these great trees, are being treated with no respect. Here we've got anthropomorphism used. Anthropomorphism. It's late, you'll have to excuse me if I've spelled anything wrong. But yes, which again, and the tongue whispering makes them seem almost so innocent. So we've got the innocence there created by that. And here, half the spring for me will have gone with them. So we've got the imagery of, and the metaphor, I suppose, of spring disappearing with them. So we've got some great stuff going on, and we've only really used 2 minutes 15. So last stanza now. Okay, so here we get a lot of imagery at the start about heart beating, which we know you associate with life. So it's almost like the speaker loses her life or sense of life when the trees die. Again, we go through the seasons, So it shows time passing, and that's almost like a kind of movement through the poem. However, we get to quiet rain, and this metaphor is, I suppose you could say it's personification, but we'll go with metaphor just to be on the safe side. The quiet rain is that kind of pathetic fantasy or imagery to show respect for nature. So it's nature showing respect for the death of nature. And we also have they, which I forgot to highlight, but the same they that was used up here is referring to the men. And then the contrast with I. So I, but I. So there's the juxtaposition of they're one group, I am separate. Okay, so now we've done the poem. And yes, it was quick, and yes, you wouldn't have made these notes in black, but you don't need to, because that will be in your head. And that's why revision is so key of these poems. And we've only used 2 minutes 48. So in your exam, you would still have a good 42 minutes, to write your essay. But before we get writing, what we need to do is think of a structure. Now, I always say aim for 4 paragraphs, but put your best stuff in your top 3. Have a 4th just in case you've got time, but you need to move on after 45 minutes, and if you've done the good stuff there, you won't feel too bad about moving on if you haven't done your 4th paragraph. So I'm going to time myself just having another look through the notes and thinking of the 4 stanzas, the 4 paragraphs, sorry, I'm not a poet. Okay, sorry if you can't see that bottom one. It's Muse's relationship with nature. So now I've got 4 paragraphs, and you can change those, but what we need to do now is select the right evidence for it. Now, some of you in your essay plans are writing topic sentences, then writing the quotes out. You've got the quotes here, you do not need to write them out, that is simply a waste of time. So what we're going to try and do is link some of these up. Now remember, it doesn't have to look pretty, it just has to make sense in your head. So first I'm going to try and find things that I can use for the presentation of nature. Okay, so in that paragraph, I'm going to use my evidence about the rote bowl and say how it symbolises a tethered animal. I'm also going to talk about green and high and how nature is presented as lush and majestic, and also the great trees. Now what we need to do, once we've thought of that, is think of how nature is presented, because that is not a specific topic sentence. So I'm going to say that nature is presented as magical and majestic. Now I've got that, what I can do is change my mind on the evidence that I want to use. So for example, if I don't think that something is matching, then I can change it. So what I did there was change the evidence about tethered animal, because I wasn't sure how that was going to fit under that topic sentence. And instead I'm going to use the symbolism of the rat and the adverb about even a rat. So even what people consider as not the nice parts of nature are magical and majestic in the speaker's eyes. Okay, now I'm going to do it for the rest of the paragraphs. Okay, as you can see, I've made the right decision with my last paragraph because I've only got 2 pieces of evidence. If I suddenly realised, if I'd put Muse relationship with nature as 3, I could easily just switch them. So now we just need to think of one word for each of these topic sentences. And that should take us, hopefully, just to 6 minutes. So, presentation of men, I think, is callous and cold. Looking at the evidence I've selected. Destruction of nature is emptiness, I think. Produces emptiness and again loss. And Muse relationship with nature is close. Oh, we've gone to 6 minutes, 7 seconds. But that's no biggie, really, considering we've then got 39 minutes, essentially, to write an essay. And that essay will be so easy to write now that we have topic sentences, specific topic sentences. So, for example, paragraph 2, we would start with the Charlotte Mew movingly presents the destruction of man, or the cause of man, as callous and cold. And we've got our evidence, which we know will all flow one after the other, as we've looked at for band 1 answer, because we've come up with this specific topic sentence that we got after we'd selected the evidence. So, no, it's not pretty, but it only needs to make sense to you and in your head for your writing. Okay, I hope that's helped. Get revising. and I'll be asking you to do some of these timed essay plans in the next few lessons.